And welcome to a session of a crossover session behind frenemy lines, whatever you want to call it here. But this has been one that's been long in the waiting and the coming for me. A man whose work I've been following for a good, I think, 10 years here. Rob, I believe I remember being back on the old post. This should show you how old I am. Back on Rob Staton's old post back on, I think it was Field Goals, saying I'm going to create this draft blog. I'm going to go do this thing. And this is 12 years ago, 10. I forget. We're getting old here. Time just lapsed. And he's gone out there. He's been kicking butt here for 10 years. Got a YouTube channel. Has been off rolling, kicking butt as well with it. Really happy to welcome to the Hawks Nest, Rob Staton of Seahawks Draft Blog, how you might know him, but also here on YouTube with Rob Staton. Rob, thank you for joining us here, man. I really appreciate you doing this.
My pleasure, Brandon. Always good to talk Seahawks. So happy to be here.
Well, me and Rob are going to get into it and go into a variety of different kind of spots and stuff today, but I just want to do the first thing off the rip, folks, for folks who are kind enough to take their time out. And Rob's got double duty. He's got a wife. He's got tons of stuff going on. He's been kind enough to take his time away. So let's be kind enough and do what we do here, which is there's a link right down in the description section below. Click that link directly over to Rob's channel. Give him a sub over there for taking the time like he is doing. And he does some great work on top of that beyond just giving us our time here today and what he's doing. Rob, there's a ton of stuff to get into this with the draft with me and you. That's for sure on this, as I know we both get geeked up about this time of year hugely. But, the place I really want to start out with on, and a place I can certainly appreciate doing this is you've been a guy a long time and voicing your opinion from a place that's, trying to be what you see for the situation to be the truth of the team itself, rather than sign it individually. And sometimes you get, definitely a lot of blowback for that, but there's got to be a sense from you at this point of, a bit of validity in this, and that, hey, I was saying that this is the way I saw it, and I'm for the most part on this down the line, I was kind of right to how I saw the team prospectively. Where are you kind of sitting at with your mindset on that and how you look at the team and sort of weathering through that storm a bit as somebody who can have some sympathy from my angle on this, knowing how hard that is sometimes to delve into those kind of topics?
Well, more than anything, I'm a Seahawks fan, first and foremost. And if I have an opinion on the direction I want the team to go, it's not because I want to be right. It's because I want the best for the Seahawks. For me and Adam, who I do my stream with, is from London. Over here in the UK, we often stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday to watch the team play. If they do have a primetime game, we're staying up till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And I run the blog like a second full-time job. And my main hope and I guess purpose is to see the Seahawks do well. So if I have an opinion on something, it's not because I want to just put an opinion out there. It's genuinely with the best interests of what I think is the best interest of the Seahawks at heart. So you're right. I mean, I've got some pushback. The problem is like for years, I got a lot of pushback because I was too positive, believe it or not. Like people would often send me messages and emails going, you were just a stand for the team. You're just too positive. And then there was a period where I think they drifted. I think they just got into a place where they weren't very competitive. They kept making bad decisions. They completely messed up the pass rush for a few years. I think they were constantly like chasing this sort of competition of contention, and we're always missing the mark. I thought the Jamal Adams trade was abysmal from the minute it was announced. And, I think that Pete Carroll stuck around a bit too long. I don't think that's aged particularly poorly, having that opinion. And, there's been one or two other things that I've got a lot of pushback for. I pretty much knew they weren't going to take Jalen Carter. That suddenly has morphed into Rob hated Jalen Carter. It was nothing to do with that. It was, I had him as the best player in the draft. I knew the Seahawks weren't going to take him. So I have got a lot of pushback for that. But I think that was more because I was saying something that was inconvenient rather than, maybe people do hate me. I don't know, but perhaps they do. I suppose there probably are some that feel that way. But I think it was predominantly because I was not always being entirely positive. But right now, I am positive about the team. I think they've had a good offseason so far. I'm looking forward to the draft. And I'll always say it how I see it. If I think something's good, I'll say it's good. If I think something's bad, I'll say it's bad. I think a lot of people do that.
I'm glad you led there because that was going to be where I wanted you to go with this next on this, is that knowing you will come from an honest state on this, knowing that there's been some feet you've held to the fire in recent years, and rightfully so, that now, as you look at the team currently and your outlook and where they're headed on this current path and trajectory, fair to then say that there's a lot more optimism and positivity from your side of this and seeing the bigger picture.
Yeah, I think so. And there are still things they need to do to become a serious contender. The team as it is today is not going to win the NFC and make the Super Bowl. And I think even if they have a good draft, that is unlikely. I still think we're in the middle of a process here rather than the end of a process. They are going to have to find a way to create a competent offensive line. I don't think they necessarily need an elite offensive line. They just need to be competent. They need to find a solution at quarterback that is long-term, so that for years, you just knew the Seahawks quarterback was Russell Wilson, and you knew that he was going to play at a certain level. They've got to find a quarterback who that, again, for the next 7-8 years at least, this guy's going to be the quarterback. This guy's going to have you contending at the end of the year. And it's very hard to find those players, and it can take a bit of time. So I think we have to give the Seahawks a bit of breathing space to do that. But they're going to have to find somebody who can fill that role. Hopefully it's Sam Darnold. I suspect it probably isn't going to be. But they're going to have to find somebody to do that. And they're going to have to make continued improvements to the defense as well. But I think they're on the right track. I think they've made sensible decisions in this offseason. They've played the hand that they have been dealt well. And I think with 10 picks in this draft and the potential, of course, to gain more through moving around the board, I'm really optimistic about the direction of the team. But they have got to have a good draft, and they've got to continue to build.
Are you buying my stance on this, that this is basically, if you were to kind of ferment this into one sentence, you'd say, it's a step back for 2 steps forward kind of off season, and that the bearing out of that is a championship potential? Is that a fair way to say? You'd say the same outlook of it on it, or that it's not a step back?
I don't think it's a step back, personally. I think really swapping Geno Smith for Sam Darnold is kind of, I don't think there's much difference between those two players. I think the fact that Darnold is, if he was $1 cheaper, he's cheaper. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be $30 million cheaper to be classified as being cheaper. And then you have an extra pick. You have the 92nd pick as a consequence of the swap. So I think that is a good move. DK Metcalf clearly wanted out. And I think when a player wants out, you have to either make it right or you move on. And they've moved on, and they've got a 2nd-round pick. I think they looked at the offensive line options, and they quite rightly identified Will Fries as the main guy. He was the best player available on the offensive line in free agency. But when the Minnesota Vikings say, we're going to give you a ton of money and 5-year contract, that nobody else got a 5-year contract in free agency except Will Fries. So he was the only one. They went above and beyond to sign him without a medical. For all they know, he walked through the building when he signed that contract, and they realized his leg's a mess. Mm-hmm. You just don't know. So I think they were right to sort of be disciplined with him. And then I think they were especially right to not just immediately pivot to whoever was left, because I don't think the options that were left were very good. So I'm comfortable with what they've done. I appreciate that everybody's desperate for them to fix the offensive line, as am I. But I think we'll see what happens in the draft. I don't think they have to spend number 18 on an offensive lineman. I think there are good options later on as well. So I'm pretty relaxed about everything, and I think that's a good place to be.
I think it is too. And it's, I think as much with the DK and Geno thing, I think that they did drive to eventually say, well, we want to be traded. But I tend to believe that the team also was pushing that process along, specifically with the contract offers that they put out there. DK wanted to get the contract done early in the offseason. Seattle wanted to wait to get the extension done until later. But I also think that if they really wanted to do it with both of these two guys, they could have got it done. Geno's deal, the story came out today with Geno mentioning the fact that he just didn't like wasn't getting the love back that he wanted essentially on the initial offer. And that's where I think John's kind of pushed this a little bit, along with we had the Green Bay rumors of the trade with DK the week prior to DK wanting to be moved. I felt like there's a bit of this, and maybe you disagree on this, where John was pushing some of that as well. And it may be that you're able to overcome it. I agree with you. Darnold's not that far off of Geno, but I think that dealing with the pressure side of it is the main important part of this, especially when it comes back to the offensive line, because the pressure rates have been so bad in recent years. To go, yeah, he's very close to him as long as you can allow him to play on time and not be under a lot of pressure. But the second you let him start to be inundated, which is a true potentiality right now as we do sit, and I'm with you. I didn't want to go for the offensive lineman in free agency. I think that that's where there's a little bit of, to me, the look on the step back part of this, and that they're willing to do that. They're willing to take a little bit of that risk for ultimately what will be the benefits of it.
Completely agree. And I think with the offensive line, I think the best thing for the Seahawks to do is possibly to just accept, and maybe sort of explain this is possibly how it's going to be, is to draft an offensive line. I just think you need to build something. You need to craft something. You need to be able to watch tape and go, well, that's a Seahawks offensive lineman, for the scheme. And I think they have got clarity on the scheme now with the zone blocking. I think you can watch tape and go, that player fits, that player fits. They've got to get 2 or 3 of those players in this draft. They've got to get them in, coach them up, accept that maybe for the first 6 weeks, there might be a few growing pains. But by the end of the season, that line might be in a place where it can be the answer for you, that you've actually got, instead of maybe just 2 starters who you feel good about, you might have 3 or 4. And then you've got to go into next off season and sort of see what's out there. Is there a free agent that you want to sign? Is there another player that you want to draft? And it may take 2 drafts to do this. I've been saying for a couple of weeks now, Brandon, that the people saying just fix the offensive line might as well just be saying just draft a franchise quarterback. It's not easy. It's not easy to do. It never is if you have like a serious need, because it could be in a draft where you say just go and get it. Like I'm sure Packers fans, for example, or Chargers might go just go and get a wide receiver. If you're on the board and all of the good ones are gone, or if there aren't any worth having, you can't force that, I'm afraid. We all want the ideal situation. Oh, a big splash in free agency and then maybe a high draft pick to fix the offensive line. But, it's not an ideal world. So they've got to play, again, the hand that they're dealt. I think they are doing that. I'm very comfortable with where they're at the moment.
Well, we're going to be in a lot of probably agreement here out the chute on this, because it is where I'm standing as well. That's how you build a great offensive line. Something that I think casual fans will not mention a lot here, Rob, is that they won't talk about the cohesion, continuity aspect of it, which brings us to the having multiple years of playing alongside a guy, and that ultimately you'll get the best performance from those guys collectively when you're able to get that versus just microwaving it and trying to make it happen fast. You touch on another point that's another one where I'm going to agree with you on, and I've been trying to warn people a little bit on this as well, who are banging the drum for offensive line. Offensive line is just not looking like that's what the value is going to be for the first pick for the Seahawks when we approach this upcoming draft, is it?
You're completely right. I spoke to someone last week. I spoke to a couple of people last week. I was listening to an interview with Mike Mayock over the weekend as well, and I know it didn't exactly go perfectly for him in Las Vegas as the GM, but I think John Gruden was making most of the decisions there.
John kind of messed that up too, as much as anybody a little bit to your point on that.
Yeah. So the consensus opinion seems to be that this is not a great offensive line first round. That this is not going to be the draft to. I mean, there are some players who are going to go in the first round, but it's not the draft that's going to be a solution provider. I really like Gray Zabel. I think a lot of people like Gray Zabel, but I think the feeling is, somebody who knows an awful lot more than I do about the draft, knows an awful lot than most people on the planet, for that matter, said that Gray Zabel would not be a good first round pick. And it may just be that the league feels that way, that he's a good second rounder, maybe not a good first rounder. Maybe someone will still take him early because of the testing and the Senior Bowl and some aspects of his tape. I really like him, but the league might just go, he's not a first rounder. And if it's not him, I don't think they're going to take Tyler Booker. I really like Tyler Booker. I just think for the zone blocking scheme, do you take Tyler Booker with the 18th pick? I don't think Donovan Jackson is a first round pick. So you're then looking at it, and I don't think Kelvin Banks is a fit for a guard either. I think he's a right tackle personally. So then you're looking at it and go, well, who are you going to take? And when you look at round 2, round 3, even round 4, you can run up a list of 6, 7, or 8 guys who are scheme fits. And I know people will go, well, this is just Christian Haynes and Anthony Bradford again, but there's not much you can do about that. Like if Steve Hutchinson was there, 18th overall, I'm pretty sure they'd take him. And you and I would be sat here going, take him.
Yeah.
And John Schneider would be taking him. But if that's not the case, what can you do?
That's where I stand with it. And on top of this, that second, third round range, you actually have kind of a good collection of guys in there that it's almost like you can, kind of pick a name from those guys and their variants. There's some difference. A lot of them are scheme fit in that spot. Just seems to be the better place that you can go and grab. I was listening to one of your shows the other night, and I have a theory to run out to you on something that I know that you were thinking about and trying to kind of rectify in your mind, being this zone's the nature of Shanahan, and that we're seeing now these bigger interior offensive linemen. McVay's been doing this last year with this 1,000 pounds of man flesh in the interior of their line that they went out there and bought, right? Yeah. I think what's happening is I think that this is all a trend that's shifted, of course, back to the running game, number one. But then number two, I think it's the cover 2 shell causing this. I want to see what you think on this, because you have 12, you got guys 12 yards off the ball now, both, no box safety anymore. And so you have a naturally lighter box. And when you go to outside zone runs or pitch plays, you are given the opportunity for the safety to get back into the play on those kind of lateral direction kind of plays versus north and south. First, when you get A and B gap, you're getting into it quickly. It's harder for the safeties to come down and fill their hole. And so, well, what do you need to do to run through the A and the B gap? You need big men, not men that can move in space. And so I'm wondering if maybe this is part of that transition now being undertaken for the interior of the offensive line because specifically that cover 2 shell prevalence. You buying it?
Yes, I am buying it. There was an article written in The Athletic, I think it was about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, sort of explaining why the Rams were going for bigger bodied linemen. And it was exactly that reason. It was exactly what you just said. They were an outside zone team. And they felt that because of the cover 2 and the way the safeties were lining up, it was better for them to have bigger bodies and a bit of smash mouth up front. I was speaking to somebody, again, another source, who said that he felt the Shanahan stuff was kind of like the trendy thing a couple of years ago. And he was predicting in the future that it would become less and less. Now, the Seahawks just appoint Shanahan disciple as their offensive coordinator. So that's maybe not the best news, but he felt that you were going to have to adjust from that kind of offense pretty soon because this is the NFL. It's cyclical. There's all sorts of trends. We're seeing a bit of a return to the running game as a consequence of this cover 2 situation. So I sort of initially wondering, is that what the Seahawks will do? Will they draft bigger bodies to work in the zone system? And there is at least some evidence of that. Shanahan drafted Aaron Banks in the second round, who is pretty much like Tyler Booker. And we've just seen Matt LaFleur's Green Bay. They run the same offense pretty much. They've just signed Aaron Banks to a $19.25 million a year contract. So there is a place for that kind of a player. And then when you look at who the Saints drafted a year ago, when Clint Kubiak was their offensive coordinator, it was Taliese Fuaga, who was 324 pounds. So again, that's that bigger body. The difference is, though, and it's just a bit of a surprise to me when I looked at the numbers, Aaron Banks graded as a good zone blocker at Notre Dame. And Fuaga was an elite zone blocker for Oregon State. So even though they were big, they were very good zone blockers. The problem with people like Tyler Booker is he did not grade very well in zone last year. So what you're having to do now is someone like that, have they got the necessary skills to become a great zone blocker, or are they never going to be that? I think he can be, because he is a weak tester, but he can get up to the second level very well. He has got some mobility to him. He's just not got that immediate burst, and he's not particularly explosive, but he is a big human being. He's in great proportion, and he can move people at the line of scrimmage. So I wouldn't rule him out for the Seahawks completely. I just wonder whether 18 overall is a bit high for him. But we know the Seahawks love, they love these big characters, mature, serious football players who are dedicated to their craft. And Tyler Booker is one of those, alongside the likes of Malachi Starks, Emeka Egbuka, Donovan Ezeraku. Matt Golden is apparently one of those kinds of players. So I think that kind of prospect is going to be Seattle's top pick.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Booker thing is one that's really interesting. I agree with all your reasoning with it. You watch him, he just gets the job done on tape. And he is more of a probably gap guy that'd be at his best in. Doesn't mean he can't potentially work within the zone. It just means that's maybe where his best part. Another spot you mentioned, the leadership angle, and that's a guy that would supposedly really kept that Alabama locker room together last year when there was some tumultuousness there. I think that does stand out a little bit as well for this team, as that's something they've gravitated towards in the past and what they've liked. So you look at this first pick, I guess. Tell me, if you can, just in general terms, where you see the first 2 days going for the Hawks. You don't have to necessarily get to specifics. I know that's a little bit hard to do at this point, but in a general measure of form, how you see sort of these 3 picks kind of going for where the value would seem to look from your board on how it would play out.
I think best player available will be the pick at 18. They are going to just take the best player on their board. I mean, look, if the best player was a left tackle, they'd pivot from that because they're not going to take another left tackle. Likewise, they won't take a player who's very similar to Devin Witherspoon, I would suggest. But if there is a need for that position and it's the best player on the board, they will take them. And I think for that reason, that the players I've just mentioned there, I a few weeks ago, or maybe even 2 weeks ago, I was saying I just click off a mock as soon as I see a wide receiver at 18. And I've done a complete flip on that, because the more I've learned, and again, the thing about it is, those of us who talk about the draft and are just, I'm sat in Rotherham in England. Okay. I watch an unbelievable amount of college football from June, May, even through to now to get the best idea of what the draft's all about. But I still don't have, I probably have like 1% of the information that teams have. And in order to sort of try and do the best job I can on a free blog, I need to go and speak to people who know more than I do about the players, the process, scouting. And, you know, all of the stuff I heard about Egbuka was, this is a Seahawk. You know, this is everything about him. And listen, I want offensive line. I want trenches. I want all of that. I'm not pitching for this guy because I've got some kind of mad, crazy obsession with Emeka Egbuka. But, you know, he was the guy at Ohio State, apparently, like the guy that everybody went to for advice. I was listening to Bruce Feldman today. Like every day I seem to learn something new about this guy. Bruce Feldman was saying that he went into a meeting with Ryan Day, broadcast meeting. Brock Hughes was on the call, in the meeting. And they said, who in your team is going to be a coach in the future? And Ryan Day said, Emeka Egbuka. He was a freshman. He was like 2 months into his career at Ohio State. Think of all the players that Ohio State have had in that period. And he said Emeka Egbuka. Like everybody, like Will Howard said, he's the guy. Someone asked Will Howard on an interview the other day, who's going to be the player that emerges from this team? And he went, oh, it's great. You know, we've got all these good players, but my answer is Emeka Egbuka. I was told that he won. Like people won about the testing and the upside. I was told he won every 1v1 basketball game in that Ohio State locker room. So I think the physical profile is there. He gets open. He's strong, physical, blocks his arse off. Good, strong hands, reliable, third down machine, can be good in the red zone. It's not that it's the biggest need. I just have this feeling that we might hear his name called at 18 because he's kind of like the complete package for what the Seahawks look for. But then again, Matt Golden apparently is extremely well respected. I know Malachi Starks is incredibly mature and professional, and he's an excellent safety. I really like Donovan Ezeraku, you know, and what he brings to the table as a pass rusher. I really like Tyler Booker. Again, it's that zone aspect to whether it determine whether we're going to take him or not. I just got a feeling it might be from that group, Brandon, and I don't know whether.
Hold on.
That's okay. I'll carry on talking. I've got a feeling that maybe that it's going to be from that group.
Sorry, dude. Cat started freaking out there for some reason.
No problem. I did a stream yesterday, and there was a dog in the background. I just love it when there's animals in the background.
She just starts caterwauling, and she's got this like it's a banshee side, and I'm like, holy crap, cut it out.
Yeah. So
sorry about that.
So those players are kind of the names I think of, and there's always a chance that others could fall a little bit. You know, Johnny Barron or people like that may end up being enraged. I don't think Colston Loveland's going to be there, but if he was there, that would be an option too. So I think there are some good options for the Seahawks, and all of the names that I've just mentioned are not offensive linemen, which drives people crazy. But that's kind of the way that I think they're going there. And then quickly on day two, I think this is going to be fascinating. I think this is the internet is going to explode over these 2 days, because if they take a book from 18, that's going to kick everybody off straight off the bat. They've took a receiver. Oh, what are they doing? And then the next day, they might go best player available again with both picks. And that might not be offensive line again. It could be a Savon Ravel. It could be one of these tight ends. I think they're going to love Elijah Arroyo. I think someone just mentioned in your chat that Mason Taylor's doing an official visit to Seattle. He's another tight end from LSU. Yeah. I wonder if they might trade up from 50 and go and get somebody. Say, we've got that extra third round pick. We've got 92. Maybe the players at 92, they're thinking that's just out of range for where we really want anybody. But the range, like the grade in between, say, 35th pick or 40th pick is better than 50th. We're going to go up and we're going to go and get somebody. And that could be Mason Taylor. That could be Elijah Arroyo. It could be one of the offensive linemen. And it could be a quarterback. They might move up and go and say, we want this quarterback. We are going to go and get them. And I would mentally prepare yourself for that if you're a Seahawks fan. I'm not saying it's going to happen. It's not a prediction. But I do think trading up is a possibility. And a quarterback is a possibility in the second round.
And when you look at John Schneider's track record, he's a man who's never traded up in the first round, but has, to your point on this, multiple times in the past targeted second round players to move up and go get those guys in that spot. I want to talk about the quarterbacks. I want to just touch on Emeka a little bit. I know it's not ground that you haven't covered already with people kind of presenting this. And that is the worry on the slot stuff. And I will admit on this a bit that there's a potentiality. I'm a bit behind the ball on this, and that this is a trend and an evolution of where this is going from a sports standpoint to what it's going to become. But I do lean back so heavily on in covering, especially the West Coast offense, going back to the Holmgren days, and we're covering it through this, that there are types of receivers to this offense. You know, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, for instance, will do some slot stuff, but he's an outside real X guy. That's really what you brought him in here to mainly kind of do. And when I look at Emeka, and I really try to do some studying on this and looking at guys in the past coming out of college, guys that play like 80% of their snaps in college out of the slot, I can't find any real historical comps outside of maybe a Justin Jefferson who then are able to really play out there on the outside consistently. And even he does most of his work to this day still from the slot and how he operates. So I may be a little off on this, but that's where I'm worried here, in that you've got so much redundancy at that point. A guy who did do 80%, I've heard you just mention, for instance, Amon St. Brown. 75% of his slots, 75% of his snaps in college were on the outside. Godwin, another one I'd heard, 98% of his slot snaps in college were on the outside, where Emeka, 80% are from that slot. And that does just, you know, maybe there's a part in taking him also that could be, look, we're not planning on paying JSN $35 million next year. I mean, because some of it could be, and there's a part of this where Emeka definitely blocks better than JSN. So when you look at like, well, the potential of adding this maybe as a long-term thing, we're getting a year out ahead in decision-making. That's what smart organizations do. But that's just a little bit of some of my trepidation here, just a little bit.
So I think one of the things we have to consider is who he played with at Ohio State. And if you are, if I was running the, I mean, imagine this, I'm running the Ohio State offense. But if I was, and I had Marvin Harrison Jr. for 2 years, and Jackson Smith and Jigba before that, by the way, and then last year I had Jeremiah Smith, I would be thinking to myself, what is the best way to make this the most effective offense I can run? That would be to put Marvin Harrison Jr. or Jeremiah Smith outside and draw some coverage attention to him, and then have Emeka Egbuka in the slot. So I think it's about, how do you max out your best players? Jeremiah Smith is very much a deep, run down the sideline, physicality. You know, you want to run him downfield a lot. Put Emeka Egbuka in the slot. You know, Smith's going to get a lot of attention. And if you notice, there were a lot of games last season where Smith didn't have a catch, or he'd have like a half without a catch, or he'd have like 3 catches in a game. And I think it's because there was a lot of coverage attention being drawn to him, which enabled Emeka Egbuka to have sort of a bit more of a free reign from the slot. So I think it was more of a tactical thing based on personnel that he was inside for a lot of that. And then the other thing I'd say, schematically from Seattle's point of view, whenever I think of the Kyle Shanahan offense, and there's nothing to say that Clint Kubiak's offense is going to be identical to it, but when I think about it, to me, it's always felt like when they've beaten Seattle, it's been death by 1,000 slants. Often they just drop back, and Brandon Ayuk's running across the middle, or whoever, and you just think, how are they just constantly creating that throw over the middle for 10 yards over and over and over again? And I just think for this system, if you are going to run a lot of that Shanahan system, then this would work. And then I look at the Rams as well, and they featured an offense with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, who are very similar. You know, they're a 1-2. And although the Seahawks have got Cooper Kupp now and Jackson Smith and Jigba, they're really only on the hook for 1 year with Cooper Kupp. And you need to manage his snaps in a big way. So I think if the future was JSN on one side, Emeka Egbuka on the other, they can both work in the slot, they can both work outside. Cooper Kupp is your number 3, and being the perfect mentor for those guys. I just think that, to me, feels like, yeah, this is the offense. And just a final point on the offensive system, you know, they don't have anybody in that Shanahan system who runs downfield. Like Juwan Jennings ran a 4.7 40. Like they don't have anybody who is sort of like the DK Metcalf. They have the guys who can work the inside, work the slant, work those shorter routes. So I think it is a potential fit. I take your points on board on some of the concerns there, and I've heard those concerns. But I've just got a feeling that the Seahawks are going to love this guy.
I could see it. So I'm not completely pulling my hair out on it if it happens. I can understand he's going to be a first round likely receiver at some point in this draft somewhere. So you're not reaching on the guy with it. It's just that baseline of a track record and the fact that even in the Shanahan scheme, you're right about that. Shanahan, but that's a big difference between him and Kubiak too, where Kubiak's got much more shot plays built within his offense than what Shanahan has. Shanahan rarely wants to throw the ball deep. And even in Jennings isn't really a slot guy. That's an outside guy. And that's your X guy to get off press coverage. Kind of part of what I wonder too with the arm length and stuff without the outside receivers is that stuff ends up adding up if you have, and we know that Ohio State track is really fast. So I understand that Emeka ran really fast, but that thing tends to bump guys' times up a little bit artificially from what they really are in the field. I think he's more of a 4.55 guy in the field, little shorter arms on the outside, getting off press coverage. That's just my little final thing on this, but where I have that little bit of concern there, but it can work. And maybe this is a little bit of, to your point on this, where the evolution of the sport is going as well on this, and that this, especially within this offense. So interesting to see on draft day if they go that direction. You are right, though, that the fans will be, we'll be walking some people off the ledge, brother.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Quarterback. You mentioned it, maybe the potential of trading up into the second round. First question out the gate, gut instinct. Are we going to come out of this draft with our quarterback of the future, or are we going to take a shot? Meaning that, we got to start trying this out, but we might come back next year looking Cabe Klubnik and Aller and Manning's no chance, but some of these other guys in next year's draft. How do you feel on that one?
I think they will take a shot on somebody. I don't think whoever they take, it'll be this is the future. I think it will be more a case of, even if they take them in the second round, I think it will be the Seahawks, I think, feel as if they've got to take some shots now. I think they were quite... I know what they've said publicly. I just get the sense the Seahawks were kind of always ready to move on from Geno, that they never felt particularly committed to him. And they wanted to get younger and they wanted to try some different things. It's not happened in the draft because the players haven't been there. I don't think it's been for a lack of desire to do that. I think if a good quarterback had been available to them in the first 2 rounds, in any of the last 3 drafts, they would have taken them. I think it's just not been there for them. And I think they will look at this draft and potentially think, yeah, you know what, we might be able to get somebody here who we can bring into the room and work on and try and develop and have them compete with Sam Darnold. So I don't think it's an amazing quarterback class. I do think there are characteristics within some of the players. So, Cam Ward's going to go first overall. I get the sense that it might be Jackson Dart who's next and then Shedeur Sanders. But, I think they're both going to go late first. And then we may see a bit of a run. Somebody told me, again, they didn't grade Will Howard in the second round, but they told me Will Howard is firmly in the second round conversation. And then someone said, I won't even be surprised if he goes in the late first. And that wasn't a prediction. That was it will not be a surprise if somebody, let's say the Jets, for example, decide, no, we've got to have this guy. So we're going to make sure we get him. And we're going to give up a 5th round pick or something to move into the 32nd pick to go and get him. I think it's probably more likely that he just goes in round 2. But when I heard that, I thought, okay, that's interesting if he's potentially going in that range. And then you see this stuff about Jalen Milroe being invited to the draft. And you think, okay, so now we're talking about maybe Will Howard's going to go in that early second. Now maybe Jalen Milroe is going to go in that late first, early second. Who else could go there? Well, Tyler Shough could go in that range easily. People keep still mentioning Quinn Ewers. So Ian Rappaport mentioned Quinn Ewers today. Tony Pauline has mentioned that Quinn Ewers is possibly going to be the 4th quarterback taken. There's still that bit of chit chat that Ewers could go there, and I've always kind of had this feeling that John Schneider likes Ewers, that he's kind of like Schneider's type of guy. So he's into that conversation as well. So I think they're sort of the players who could end up going early second round, and frankly, all of them may be complete and utter busts and not do anything in the NFL. And that feels distinctly possible. But I just wonder if the Seahawks think, oh, we've got to have one of these guys. And we're willing to give up the second, 3rd round pick to go and get him, whether they will do it. But then at the same time, when they're visiting with Mason Taylor ain't making it to 50, I don't think. So if they're visiting with Mason Taylor, I think they're scoping out these tight ends to maybe go up and get one of them,
I agree.
I think they feel this offense needs a dynamic pass catching tight end. So maybe they won't move up for the QB. maybe they'll move up for Elijah Arroyo or Mason Taylor.
Not to mention, you make a move like that, there's a counter to this too, where you get to then potentially move fans' money off the books. If you're going to get another H-back type guy, then you can go and now you can free that money to spend that money elsewhere. So it kind of allows you to do some other stuff. Who is your quarterback? Who is just your guy in this draft? Outside of, let's say, Cam Ward or Shedeur, just won't be in play. But do you have a guy in the draft, or are you pretty much just maybe you're lukewarm on all of them?
There's nobody I want to hang my hat on. There's nobody I want to say that's my guy. I just don't think there's anybody who stands out. And typically in the past, I've looked for those sort of big physical tools and just said, you know what, I'll take a chance on that. If give me someone with mobility and a big arm, and that's what I would go for. There's so many flaws with Drew Aller's game, but if he'd have come out, he may have been someone I was interested in, just because you can sort of see, okay, I can see that works with this player, and this player currently in the league. And with this group, there isn't really anybody. I can sit here and go, do you know, I see why someone would like Tyler Shough, or why Tyler Shough could be appealing. I can see, why Will Howard having almost perfect 4 games in the playoffs could be appealing. And his maturity and his competitive nature. I think Riley Leonard has some talent to him. I think later on, Curtis Rourke has a bit about him. If you're talking about someone who's going to go maybe in the 7th round because of his injury, because of his ACL surgery, you could take a chance on that. With Quinn Ewers, you watch a lot of his road games and you think, this guy's got something about him, and then you watch some of the home games and some of the bigger games and you think, well, what is he doing there? Like, he can have a whole half where he just doesn't look like he's ever played the game before, but then he throws some of the best passes you see in college football. So I think they're all over the place, and I wouldn't be bothered if they didn't take one, frankly. I think they probably will at some point, but nobody that I feel like I want to bang the table for them.
Yeah, I again feel the exact same way with it, where it's fine if you do it, but there's certainly nobody that I'm just saying, no, we've got our next Russ here in the 3rd round. And guys are going to get overdrafted. I think there are going to be 4 quarterbacks taken in the 1st round when it's all said and done. I really do. All right. You're Kevin Costner, bro. You're Sonny from Draft Day. Okay.
I've never seen that film, by the way.
Oh, you never have? Okay. Well, you got to go see this, brother. You're in this. You'd love it for that reason. It's
you would have thought I would have watched this by now, wouldn't you?
Yeah. It's not a classic. Okay. It's a guilty pleasure. I'll admit that. So I ain't trying to say, look, dude, it reinvents cinema. No, Costner's playing Costner. Okay. But there's a scene in it where he starts out before the draft as a general manager, and he's got a Post-it note, and he writes 2 Post-it notes. And he says, by any means, I come out of this draft with these 2 guys. Who are the 2 guys Rob Staton's putting down on his Post-it note that I need to come out of this draft with?
Oh, that's a good question, that. Ooh. Wow. Oh, let me have a think about this, because I
can come back to it. We come back to it. Because I know
I've got my board here. It's just, I always want to make sure that I answer these questions, with the best, because I was on 7:10 and I got asked a question that put me on the spot. And then about 20 minutes after I'd finished, I was like, I wish I'd answered it differently. And then they used that clip as their tweet. And I was like, no.
Oh, dude.
The 20 minutes guys. We were on, you've picked the one thing that I didn't want him to clip. I'm gonna discount all of the players that I don't think are going to be there at 18, because that it just feels like that'd be cheating to say, oh, Armand Member would be good. So
I'd give it to you. You have the chance to do that, because, as you said, you can trade up in this draft. This may be the one rare time with John, because he's got the arsenal of picks in the top 100, to where he would do that. And so I operate without any constraints on this one.
Okay, the 2 players I'm going to name are going to be, I think Elijah Arroyo is ideal for the scheme on offense. So I'm going to say him, and I think that would give you the chance to have. He's not George Kittle, because who is? But I think his blocking's not going to be as good as Kittle's. But I do think he, as a pass catcher, could be that same level of talent. So, and I think for the way that this offense runs, I am going to say Arroyo, and I am going to say, I'm just going to go and say get me Chase Lunt. Do you know why I want to say Chase Lunt? Because he runs to that second level and he hammers people in the face. And that's what this offensive line needs. So go and give me Chase Lunt, like a runaway mine train, run into that second level, get it in 3, get it in 4, and go and hammer somebody. That's what I'm going to go for.
Yeah, Lunt, I love Lunt. Roy, I like Lunt as well. Killed it at the Senior Bowl, no doubt about that. But Lunt, nobody is more dynamic as an outside zone blocker as a tackle last year too. So you're picking one there with you're really thinking you're getting as much. We go back to that pure scheme fit, old traditional marks you're looking for from the position. A guy could kick into guard probably too. If you ask him to go do that, I love those picks, man, as potentials.
I just looked in the comments. Somebody actually guessed who I was going to say.
We got a smart crew here, man. You got a smart crew. They're on it. They're on it in that way. Do you buy this is the best tight end class in the last 15 years?
No.
Oh, okay. A little overrated then.
It's not so much this overrated. I think it's a good tight end class. But I'm looking on that. There was a draft not that long ago. It may have been the one before the last one. So what are we at? 2025. Let me have a look on this 2023
reported draft.
So you had a draft where you had Kincaid, Musgrave, Mayer, Washington, Kraft, Laporta. That was pretty good. So I think that's not a bad one. 2022, was that a good tight end draft? No, that was a bad one.
We've had some bad ones. We've had some real like holy Lord, like this is the best we got.
I think
remember the Troutman draft. Troutman was like,
yeah.
Like, oh Lord, you had to sell yourself on trust. Big Frankenstein moving sucker out there. Like, this guy's not going to work, really.
It might. I'm sure there was one where we had a whole bunch of tight ends that were kind of like clustered together. I don't think it was 2021 either, because I'm looking here and it definitely wasn't 2021. But I think it's what you have is you have two players who are, in other drafts they would not be top 10 picks, Brandon. Yeah, but in this draft they're going to be, and potentially Tyler Warren and Colson Loveland, who are very similarly graded. Some teams have Colson Loveland graded higher. Some have Tyler Warren graded higher. Some teams will happily take Warren in the top 10. Apparently there are some out there that wouldn't take him until the late first. So I think neither of them are good blockers. And I think Loveland is a bit more like Sam Laporta, and Warren as a pass catcher is more like Gronk. So, they're going to go very high, and then you have like a gap, and then I think Arroyo is late first. I think Taylor's an early second, but then I think there's a significant jump then. So you've kind of got 4 who are going to go early, and then you have a clan of Harold Fannin Jr., who I think is probably a third rounder. I would like Mitchell Evans at Notre Dame. A lot of other people like Terrence Ferguson. There's something about Terrence Ferguson that turns me off. Gunnar Helm is okay. Jackson Hawes can block pretty well. And then you have, a handful of day 3 guys who are interesting. So I don't think it's not a bad class. It's not overrated. I just think you're kind of looking at a 2 and then a 2 and then a bit of a gap. So I think if you really want that if they really want a tight end, if Kubiak's in there going, John, get me a proper move tight end, get me somebody who can stretch the seam and potentially be a number 2 target for us, then I think you need to get up and get Mason Taylor or Elijah Arroyo.
Makes a lot of sense. And you love the lineage, bloodline stuff that you get with Taylor. We've seen so many recent examples at times in NFL history of guys coming that are sons of this and come out and they're very good NFL players. They're prepared to play. They're ready to go. That feels like a guy who can hit the ground running if he comes in here. I got to get sold a little bit on Arroyo. Just so much of it was produced in that offense at times with the touches with him. And granted, he went to the Senior Bowl and he was cooking guys with route running. So I'm not going to deny that. And the hands look good there too. But just so much of the Miami offense is him just bubble screen here, tunnel screen back over here. Just sometimes a lot of the manufactured touches and what he was doing, but no doubt he's an athletic freak and he can move and all that stuff, and very likely probably going around in that spot of things in the draft. So wouldn't hate any of it on that side of it. What about running back class? This is also one that's spoken very highly about as being one of the deepest in recent years. Are you in a similar place with the running back class? And it's good, but not as maybe sparkling as some people like to make it out to be.
Well, as I mentioned, I was having a chat with somebody last week or the week before last, and they said it was an overrated running back class, which I found interesting. I think his view was, yes, it is deep, and clearly it is deep. I mean, it's insane how many names are on the list that are going to get drafted. But I think what he means is, Ashton Genty's a good player, but is Amarian Hampton as good as maybe some are making out? I think he's a good player. I don't think he's a top 15 pick. Travion Henderson is decent, but I don't think he's as good as Ken Walker and Breece Hall coming out, and yet people think he's going to go in that kind of range. Quinton Junkins looks unbelievable at the combine, but on tape, it's not particularly exciting. I think DJ Giddens is underrated at Kansas State. I think he's a really good player. Caleb Johnson.
I love Gideons, dude. I love him. He's so much freaking fun, dude. I vaulted my boards. I was like, this is the one people are going to rake me for. I'm glad you like him too, because I found him awesome. I just thought he was. Sorry, I didn't mean to break your thing, but you're one of the only people I've heard kind of mention him as much in this running back class of some of the guys, and I just thought he was great.
Well, it's funny because I do wonder if he ends up. He probably won't, but part of me wouldn't think about him, and I was thinking of Zach Charbonnet, because what happened with Charbonnet was he was like a big blog favorite, and then he didn't turn pro. He went back to UCLA, which was a huge surprise. And then we spent a bit more time talking about him. We had like 2 years of talking about him, and then they drafted him in round 2. And you're thinking, oh, that's kind of cool. They took him. We didn't think they were going to take him because of Ken Walker, but they took him, and you think, fair enough. And you kind of watch Giddens, and you think it's the same thing. Like, I thought he was going to declare last year. Really surprised he didn't. And then you see him again, and you think, yeah, he's really good. And people go, he's not very explosive though, and he's not this, and he's not that. I saw someone say he was like a 7th round pick, and then he went to the combine and tested amazingly. And I always kind of felt he was poor man's Alvin Kamara. Yeah, and then he tested like real-time Alvin Kamara. So I think he's a 2nd round pick. And I don't want the Seahawks to draft a running back that high, but
it's just the value of it's about value and identifying these guys in the right value of things. And there's people that put like a Caleb Johnson, for instance, over that guy, and Caleb with his 4.7, and Caleb needs a hole opened up for him. You get anybody in the backfield, he's done. Gideons can dance around guys in penetration and still get you up and create that, most beautiful 1-yard carry you've ever seen in your life, on top of being a home run hitter for the position. There's something about watching him run that I think is a little bit different from these other guys in the draft. Judkins, to me, doesn't he feel like a 49er back all day? Just a robot, run, go hit the hole.
Yeah. I was so impressed with how he looked at the combine, and then I went back and reviewed the tape, and I just thought, no, I haven't missed anything with this guy. I find him quite boring to watch. Yeah. And I find Giddens quite exciting to watch, and I find Judkins quite boring to watch. But then, Judkins has got a frame that is, it did remind me a little bit of like, Ken Walker looked like that sort of thing. So maybe he will go in the 2nd round. I think Caleb Johnson's a good player. Just didn't test very well. But, when you can run as well as he did and break off the amount of runs he did when you do not play in an offense with any passing game at all, at Iowa, that is impressive. And then, I've got a whole bunch of round 3 guys, a whole bunch of day 3 guys. I mean, I've not watched everybody because I don't have the time to watch everybody. I have 27 running backs with the draftable grade, which is ridiculous. So deep, but maybe not as star-studded as some are suggesting.
To your point on the 3rd round, I think what we're going to see is late 2nd and then into the meat of 3rd round. I think you're going to see about 6, 7, 8 running backs taken in there, all for varying reasons. Like, you'll have your bell cow kind of guys that you want to pick. And you talked about Henderson. I think you're right on that. He's getting that Jahmyr Gibbs bump, where you have a player that came before who they see this archetype of, and they're like, that guy had success. Let's do that same thing. And who cares if we have to overdraft him? And in Gibbs' case, they took him at 12, and that was at the time like, whoa, at 12? Like, I like Gibbs, but at 12? So I think the same thing. Even a guy like a weird guy like a LaQuint Allen, for instance, going up potentially higher than people are thinking, because the people will look at him as a weapon rather than look at him as this number 1 back type that's going to get 15 to 20 carries a game. And with more of these fit for these kind of running backs, isn't there more than ever for, different dimensions of backs rather than just, is he your 1, is he your 2? It's more about touch guy.
Have you seen Rashad Smith?
Yeah. I've got him in the 3rd round.
Yeah. He's another guy who's
I know first year to playing running back. I mean, you talk about having upside and looking for how do I analyze a guy to think that he'll have more upside beyond what he's got? The guy's just been new to the position in his first year, and he puts up 1,400 yards. And as a former receiver, has his best year of his career as far as a receiving back goes even though he played receiver prior, like most catches, most yards receiving out of the backfield, and he catches it like a receiver out of the backfield. But a guy that I've got in the third round, because I'm not doing where he's been. I'm doing where I think he's going on that. Where do you got him at?
Yeah, so round 3, and
okay.
Somebody who just when you watched him, there was just something about him. It's just something about him. Like you sometimes you just watch a player and you think, he may not work, but I'm intrigued. If he landed on the team that I follow, I'd be really fascinated to see him in the first preseason game, for example, and see what he can do at the next level. So an interesting player.
I just think it's too about you're building up weapons on your team now more than ever. It used to be a bit like have your trio. Maybe it used to have been the old way, but now 17 game season. They're trying to go to 18 games, 2 Thursday night games. I think now you have to have more of an allotment of guys that you're filtering through a little bit on that touch thing. And so now it's about getting weapons and getting mismatches and trying to utilize that, especially when it comes to running backs and that thing we're seeing now as far as a little bit of the running back wide receiver thing start to meld together in recent years and then become times almost ubiquitous as far as a position goes. We'll kind of wrap up here on this, so I don't want to keep you too long, but a couple of other quick questions I had for you on this. And this is another one that might be out of the left field that you hadn't thought a lot about, but I do wonder if somebody that's covered the draft as deeply as you have for a 10-year period. What do you think is the next trend as we go in here into the draft for something that a team can maybe be ahead on ahead of the game and where other teams are at? That there's this trend going to these kind of players being devalued at this position who shouldn't be. Or where like length's going to be king here in the next couple of years, or it's really now more about speed than ever because of the lack of physicality within the game. And so you really want to be targeting more or less on the big, long guys and more on the smaller, faster guys. And maybe there isn't a trend you're seeing on that, but I just kind of wondered if that's something you think about at all with that there's something that you see moving here into the future on this one.
Yeah, there is actually. I think we are witnessing it a little bit already, and I think it's going to go this way. Is that we are going to see a return to some of the older school elements of football. And I think we're seeing a return to the running game. But I think what that will mean, I think, you mentioned about the offensive line earlier. I do think that the game has just become so finesse in certain ways. And some of it has to happen for health reasons and rule changes for health reasons, which are understandable. But I think the way that teams are going to start combating that is by just being physically, the trenches are going to be as important as ever. I know what people are going to say to that. Well, you guys have just done 30 minutes on why the offensive line in the first round, but it's not about the players. Yeah. It's not about just taking anybody. It's about, you've got to have good players up there. But I think we saw a bit with the Eagles winning the Super Bowl. I think if you've kind of got that, if you have a star back and a great running game and an offensive lineman who just take away your soul, I think that's what it's going to be. And I think the teams who can drive that mantra forward and on defense as well, just have some physically imposing, intimidating players up front in the trenches. I think that is going to be the trend. So I would be looking. I mean, look, I think you have to grade every player accordingly. You can't say, well, I'm going to take this player in round 2 because, well, he punched someone in the face or something, or like Chase Lunt's now in round 2 because he runs through somebody's face in the second level. It's not anything to do with that. But I think I would be, if there was an opportunity to get that, if Tyler Booker could run a 5.10, for example, and a decent split, I'd be all over that pick at 18. Like thinking that's the kind of thing the Seahawks are looking for. That's what you need. So I think that's what it is. I think it is. We're going to see a somewhat of a return to that sort of smash mouth, old school style, and then in a few years' time, someone will work out a tweak, and it'll be, the passing game will be unlocked again, and it'll be like 5,000-yard passing quarterbacks once more and stuff like that. But we've already seen the numbers. Like for a little while, the quarterbacks getting up to 5,000. I think I'm right in saying it's coming down a bit. The average over the last few years has been dropping. So. Yeah, that's the way it's going.
Well, it's the theory was out there that a bit of maybe Carroll's defense and his influence over the past 10 years was so to the NFL that it kept defenses simple and sort of real rudimentary, as you had offenses pushing the ball forward with pre and post snap motion and getting more diverse than ever before. And now we're starting to see defenses come forward with the pre to post snap changes and coverages specifically out of that cover 2 shell. It's just giving these offenses fits. And so they're taking a bit back of that rope. But I think you're right. And then what we'll see at that point on that next adjustment will be the safety coming into the box, and then Coach Carroll will be rubbing his hands together like, my defense will work again. We're finally back. It's going to go. A couple of we got a couple donations, but if you have just a couple quick maybe just gems of late round, for day 3 guys. Let's go day 3. Is there any couple day 3 guys that you say from Seahawks fans, be aware of this guy as a guy who looks very Seahawky and who I could definitely see them targeting to day 3, which is, of course, according to John, we've got a much more of a day where they'll reach for a little bit more to need, more of a, hey, we just like this guy type of pick play versus the value in the early days.
Okay, so I'm looking at the board here. I think Robert Longerbeam is a player to keep an eye on, cornerback, Rutgers, potentially. I think he's somebody on day 3 that could be interesting. I think they are going to have some interest in the linebackers in day 3. So, Jeffrey Basser, Chandler Martin, Jackson Woodard, Nick Martin, Cody Simon, Shamar James, Cody Lindenberg, players like that could be of interest to them. I really like Nazir Stackhouse. Like, I watched Nazir Stackhouse, Georgia defensive tackle, on tape, and I did not like his tape at all. And then I saw him at the combine, and I thought, I don't care. Like, the guy he is the size that he is, and he barely looks like he's got any bad weight on him. Like, I'll take a chance on that. So get him in and turn him into a 2-town dynamo, as far as I'm concerned. So I think if you can get him round 4, round 5, I think it's someone who could be a good nose tackle for you. So I think he is an option. I think there is some. I know that John Schneider said it's not a good center class, and it's not. But I do think with Eli Cox, Jonah, I know someone who really likes Jonah Monheim, who knows what he's talking about. Drew Kendall has got some testing qualities, at center that day 3, again, round 4, round 5. You may be looking at those guys. Bryce Cabell, do you like? Really like Connor Colby, the right guard at Iowa, somebody who could be a decent fit. Ricky White III, the receiver from UNLV. I like a lot of what he does. I think Brew McCoy is immensely talented. I don't know what the injury has done to him, because he had a really bad injury. But I think he's somebody, if he ended up being an undrafted player or 7th round or something, bring him in and just give him a shot to make a team. Nick Nash is a player that I really like, who might go later on as a receiver. Running backs, Jarquez Hunter's fun. Potentially Jaquindon Jackson will last to sort of the later round. And then the other one I'll mention is just Curtis Rourke, because I think Curtis Rourke showed enough at Indiana to think, what, if you could get him later on, in this system, why not? And he had played behind a horrendous offensive line, and yet he was responsible for the least number of self-provoked sacks. He had 1. 6 self-provoked pressures, again, the least of all the quarterbacks in this draft. His time to throw was the 2nd worst. So he had hardly any time to throw, but was still dealing with pressure very, very well, getting the ball out quickly. And when you actually watch him play, you didn't feel like you're watching him rushed. It just all felt controlled, like he was in control of things. And he did throw over the middle, which is what I always look for. Can a quarterback throw over the middle? What is he going to do on 3rd downs? How's he throw into the outside, some difficult layered throws? And he did provide that. He's not got the biggest arm, and he's not particularly mobile. He played on an ACL for the whole season, for God's sake. But he did elevate Indiana to a degree. So I think later on, round 6, round 7, because of the injury, you might end up with somebody who could do something, even if it's just to be a backup. So I think, there's a bunch of names. And, you never know, Brandon, maybe one of those will end up being a good player in the league, and we can reflect on this barrage of names I've just thrown you away.
No, I like it. And I specifically, I do, I like Curtis Rourke as well. And certainly the quick release and accuracy and how he played was very impressive. Nazir Stackhouse is another name that you mentioned on that, just a guy that's been kind of caught my eye. And I agree, he's not giving you anything pass rush wise. There's no doubt. There's no upside to him as a pass rusher. There's no doubt to that. But can he be a guy in the middle that clogs things up and becomes that nose tackle? And you get it in day 3, and it's quality day 3 nose tackle to fit that need. I just would love that fit from a value standpoint, hitting the need. It's the place I always say is the best place. The X marks the spot on a draft is where you get the value hitting the need at the right spot, where you're not having to do one or the other. You get to do both, essentially. Couple quick donations here, if we could. Martin Lawrence, thank you for the $5 donation out here, I think, in your neck of the woods there. It says, look at how difficult the Geno extension seems to be for the Raiders. For indications, we did the right thing trading for Dini. We did the right thing trading Geno. DK wanted out anyway. So speaking a little bit, I'm sure you've seen the stories a bit today on coming out with Geno talking about the situation in Seattle a bit. What would be your take on that?
Well, I mean, I apologize if I think, I'm going to say something that may trigger some people, but I
That's all right. I do that often.
I really just wish that Geno Smith would bore off, quite frankly. I read the quotes today. I think he's got his head stuck up his backside. I think some of the stuff he's talking about, how he sees himself, talking about how, his time in Seattle and maybe he's got something better and all this. And I'm thinking, mate, you're talking like you're Josh Allen. Like you're not. Like just get your head down, get over there and just get on with it. And I don't really understand why we're still talking about it. Like it's not even the fact that these articles come out that Geno Smith did a press conference today. I just feel like Seahawks fans need to move on. Like I'm still, and the media and the radio shows, like he's gone. Like they've traded him away. They brought in the replacement. I don't regret anything of this situation. I don't really care what Geno Smith does in Las Vegas. Like he can go and win 10 games or 5 games for all I care. Like I think the Seahawks were totally justified in what they did, and I'm just not interested. And I thought it was quite an arrogant interview he did with Albert Breer. So a bit of a turn off for me that.
I'm the same way with it. I'm a guy that was really, I think, on the early days of this, pounding the table for Geno in a way where so many of the fans were close. The loss of Russell and still the vision of that, and like they couldn't accept him on that base, then just not like him, and that for a while you couldn't get the fan base to kind of appreciate his play. And then by the end, I felt like it got to the point where it went overcorrection. And now in the way that they're talking about it is in that kind of same light at times where it's like we've lost this top 5 quarterback, and how sometimes people are talking about him a bit. And it's like, look, that's not. Wait, we've gone over. I know I was one of those ones making the case, but not this far. Like it was to a degree. It was always to this line. Let's not run it past the line.
Let me ask. Can I ask you a question, Brandon? Because one of the things that started to emerge, and a few of the journalists and the media people in Seattle were sort of suggesting this, like, there was that time in training camp when Geno was injured, and the thought process was really he just wanted to let the Seahawks see what they were missing without him.
Right.
And I just thought, my word, like, isn't that just an insight into the mindset of Geno Smith, that if this was in fact the case, that he pretended to be injured to prove a point about how bad Sam Howell was? That to me is not what I want. I don't think it's what any team really wants. I think they want people who are all in. And that sounds to me a little bit as if, there was more of a me first kind of approach going at there. And that he had no real right to expect to be the one to break Seattle's rules for when they give extensions. They don't extend players 2 years before the end of their contracts. I don't really know why I expected them to deviate from that. And I thought that left a sour taste in my mouth when people were talking about that. Now I'm reading all this stuff today and all the quotes, and I just think I'm glad they've moved on. And I don't, Sam Darnold may or may not be the answer. They might draft someone in this draft, but I'm glad to draw a line under it and move on to the next chapter.
I've long said I'm 100% in agreement with you that's a small little act, but sometimes small little acts say big things. Small little things like that. And when you're the leader of the team and you've got to be unassailable as the starting quarterback, and that you do that type of stuff, it doesn't ring true to being a leader of the team. It rings true to being selfish. Let me take you down your line on this in the same place. Completion percentage. How many times did we maybe go through this year where he could have just thrown it away, but he didn't throw it away? Was that partially because you wanted to get the 70% completion escalator in your contract hit? And if the team's doing Geno so dirty on this, why didn't they sit him for the final game of the season to save $6 million like the Cowboys did with Cooper Rush? If they're operating, because that's the other narrative in this, is that somehow John's now being this super cold-blooded guy to all these players, legends or not, he's cutthroat, he's cold-blooded. And no, this is standard operating procedure. And if anything, he's been on the nicer side of it and how he's operated with players and giving them a little bit more of that extra time. So I'm 100% like mind with you on this one. I don't get it.
I think if you asked DK Metcalf what he thinks about this situation, he would repeat pretty much what you have just said there about taking risks for completion percentage. It is my understanding that is one of his bugbears, and that they did not see eye to eye, those two players, and that was one of the issues. So
yeah, and that's BS. I'd be mad about it if I was DK too. Like, what are you doing? What are you out here doing? It's hard enough to win games. You're going to try to win games and then make sure you're scoping in on your escalators on top of it. Like, get your head out of your butt. What do you, and again, this in addition to 2 years, like you mentioned, another good key point. You have 2 years left in your contract. We didn't do it for Russ. Why would we do it for you?
Didn't do it for anybody. Cam,
yeah,
Marshawn, Earl.
You shake your head a bit at this. And so I'm with you. We got to move it on with this one. Appreciate the time with Geno here. Nobody did him dirty on this. He wanted to be moved. He wanted to be traded at the end of the day. They gave him a contract offer. Wasn't like they didn't come to him and give him an offer. They gave it to him and he didn't want it. He wanted, and by the way, also talking to Carroll throughout the season. That's great. You got your coach who's trying to get a relationship with you, and then you're going home at night and you're like, yeah, that sounds like that would be functional.
That you can't have that going on. And listen, I'm sure it benefited Geno and it maybe helped him in certain games, and he played well in some games, and maybe Pete's ear was a useful tool in that. But you can't be having that. You can't be having the quarterback having chit chats with the old coach all the time. You know, the Seahawks need to move on to the Mike Macdonald era. So
yeah,
again, I'm glad we're trending that way now. And DK's gone, Geno's gone. I think it's an interesting sort of next chapter now for Seattle.
Yeah. It's exciting. We've shaken it up, and we're not hopefully getting our shake out of this mediocre state that we've kind of been in for 10 years with it, and that'll be what I think we will, quite frankly. I don't know if it's fast, but it's going to come out of this, and that this is what this took, was a shake up. Guard Knight, thank you for the $5 donation. Says, I love this collab because you two don't necessarily agree on everything. Thanks for visiting the nest, Rob. I want to thank you too, Rob, for coming on in here. And again, I love that about this too. I like you're open to it as well on it. I think disagreement's so good, and that it helps. I think that this is what people, not because we want to fight, but you can get to more of, I think, the heart of the matter at sometimes on some of this stuff within good disagreement on that. So appreciate that, Garth. And I just want to say again at the top of this, I can appreciate them doing this, Rob. And nobody out there can appreciate this more than somebody that also delves into this item of it and understands what the slings and arrows that come your way is, that it's not easy. The easier way on the path of doing this is to not be truthful and honest. The easier path to do this in this content creation game is to butter everything up. And that the people that take the harder road on this, when you watch them, understand that even if you don't agree with them, to understand that they're not doing it for always the benefit of their own channel at that point. They're doing it because they've got, what is the word I'm looking for? Trying to be honest about the way you're doing this, Well,
that's it, and I think it's quite interesting because, you don't. It's not a major money making scheme for anybody. Really, this is all crafted out of passion for the Seahawks. And when you come home from work, as I do pretty much every day, and you immediately slap on the tape and you sit there and you're watching film and you're writing and you're doing the stuff like this. And then somebody tells you don't know what you're talking about, who's not done any of these things. It is quite difficult to accept that sometimes, and that is essentially the world that I think a lot of us who do these kind of things live in. That you commit so much of your time and your energy and your life to sort of trying to educate yourself to provide the best content. And then someone who doesn't do that tells you you're bloody useless. And then you sort of fire back and then you're an arsehole. And you think it's quite hard to handle that sometimes. So when you can get on a stream and have a conversation, and I think disagreement's the absolute focal point of critical thinking. Like that's the problem with Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, is that now people kind of separate into their own teams and then don't listen to anybody. But when you get together and you actually have a conversation with somebody and you can have an exchange of views and you can have different opinions, I think it's so important. And that's why I think, I don't turn any of these invitations down, because I tend to think, this is how you learn. You go on these things and you hear somebody else's opinion and you have a conversation about it. You have to do that. So I hope that people enjoyed listening to this as much as I enjoy doing it, because I think it's the only way to sort of learn and develop. And you have to hear other people's opinions sometimes.
And the audience ultimately appreciates it. When you take a hard stance on things in the past couple of years, like you have on certain things that have proven to ultimately be true, that the people will appreciate and understanding that, oh, not only was he be honest, but he happened to also be right about the situation. And that isn't that kind of a nice too for even for how it might have made me feel and sort of emotionally the moment, you know?
Well, I can remember, do you know what? I'll tell you a story. So when a year ago, was it a year ago? No, it was 2 years ago. And I was so I just got the best information like on Jaylen Carter. Like, there was no way I was wrong on this. Like, but the day of the draft, and Bremen had gone on like Vison, the betting company, the TV channel in Las Vegas, had me on every week because they could not believe there was somebody out there who thought that the Seahawks were not going to take Jaylen Carter. And because all of the bookies were saying they had me on so that they could basically make an interesting piece out of it. Like, you know, look at this guy. He thinks that he knows more than the bookies. And then about an hour before the draft started, I just had this absolute, just the energy just zapped out of me. And I said to my wife, I says, I am not looking forward to this. Like, if I've got this wrong and they take Jaylen Carter, it's pretty much the end of the blog, because I've said on so many different articles and channels and everything, they are not going to take this guy because of everything I knew. I've not talked about 85% of the stuff I know about Jaylen Carter because I don't think it's appropriate. But I just knew they weren't going to take him because of that stuff. And yet that hour before, and I said, my wife said, well, just forget about it. I said, you know, I can't. I said, so the only thing I could do was sit down and the last hour before the 2023 draft, I wrote an apology. I just wrote an article saying, I've got this wrong. I'm sorry, you know, like I'm going to learn from this, and I've let everybody down. And I had that in my drafts, so that if they took Jaylen Carter, I was just going to post it and just be like, that might be the last thing I ever write, because I was that much pressure on that situation. And when they didn't take Carter, the relief, it wasn't joy, it wasn't like enjoyment, it was just like, oh my God. Like it was just like, I can't, thank God for that, because it did feel as if it was like the whole blog. And I've been doing it since 2008 was at stake, because your credibility was at stake there. So it was a relief more than anything. And I really hope I never have to go through that again.
Well, and I always remember the time too, because people come in my chat and they're giving me hell about the fact, and certainly I didn't help matters by gassing the fan base up with Cortez Kennedy comps and videos and all that. And, you know, so it's like, it was really
fair. He was a freaking great player.
I loved him. No, I loved him. But I was supportive in where you were coming from on that, as much as I loved Carter and I loved him. But I did say at the same point, guys, Malik McDowell was just a couple years ago. This was just a couple years ago. You have the same position, at worst character concerns. I love Carter all day, but if they pass on him, they're passing on him because they know something about him from something that has nothing to do with what he's bringing on the field. It's not because, oh, well, he's just not refined enough as a pass. No, it's that he's got this laundry list of items where the whole car wreck and the car, that's just the tip of the little baby
That was
iceberg.
the tip of the iceberg. That was the tip of the iceberg. There was so much stuff. I don't think there will. I mean, I don't know, because I don't know everything about every player, but he must be in the top 10 of like most red flags ever.
100%.
And that's why, you know, when you say Cortez Kennedy, it's name anybody, name any elite defensive tackle. He is as talented as they are. He should have been the number 1 overall pick, and he lasted to what, the 10th pick?
Yeah.
Was it the 10th or the 8th or something?
10th.
The 10th pick. So that it wasn't just the Seahawks. Like, you cannot have a player that talented and have that many teams passing him. And then it emerged that even the Eagles were like, I don't know if we should do this.
Yeah.
If they hadn't taken him, he might have gone in the second round. Like,
well,
that's how bad the
why did they take
were.
Why did they take him? They had an extra first round pick, and they had Bulldogs East out there in Philly to keep his butt in line. You can't undersell that part of it either. We don't have that. I don't have a cavalcade of Georgia players that are going to be like, what's going on this morning, Jaylen? You getting in the gym? You in the gym this morning, Jaylen?
well, yeah, it's funny you should say that. I mean, I can't talk about it, but
he didn't get through his pro day, Rob. I mean, you know, the man, he couldn't get through his pro day.
They never knew what he was doing at Georgia. He never used to turn up. Like, he just did what he wanted for the whole time. Like, it just, And that's like one, again, talk about tip of the iceberg. You couldn't take him. You just couldn't take him. And good for him that it's worked out. I mean, I still don't think he's playing anywhere near as well as he could be, by the way.
He doesn't play the run. He's a dynamic pass rushing defensive tackle right now who they protect with run snaps. He may become more, but that's where he's at right now.
He's a good player, but he should be Aaron Donald. Like he should be wrecking every game.
Yeah.
And he isn't, because he's gonna do it his way. And I don't regret anything about that. Anything. And it really pissed me off after the Super Bowl that everyone was going, oh, they got Byron Murphy. And it's like, oh, come on. Like, just give him a chance. He's had 1 year in the league. Let's just see how he develops over the next few years. Because it took Grady Jarrett a few years to get going. And that's who Byron Murphy reminds everybody of. So, yeah, no regrets there. And Devin Witherspoon's a good player. So it's not.
No, he's a great player, and Grady Jarrett didn't play nose tackle his first year either, predominantly. So that's a little bit of the factor there, is they let him play in the right spot and he can go. And I'll tell you, as we got a couple more donuts. Stood out to me, Randy Mueller's story about this very thing. Get a chance to interview a former general manager for our Seahawks back in the mid '90s, and asked him about the two that stood out to me as my childhood. As you're the kid watching as a kid on the draft day, and Warren Sapp, we passed. Oh, if I wasn't Warren Sapp, he's dropped. That would be great. Randy Moss. See it on tape at Marshall. This guy's going to be amazing. So I had to ask him, like, why did you pass? Why? And it's like, the baggage was incredible. And I'm like, is it bad? Was Sapp as bad? He's like, no, Sapp, you could get around that stuff. But the Moss stuff was just over the top. And I was like, okay, well, that's place where we come to. And I say that this is where I will appeal to authority when it comes, some stuff about Carter, but a lot of times on this stuff, when we pass on a player and it's a character stuff, where I will appeal to the authority and say, look, they got investigators and contacts, and they've done their due diligence on this, that if they're passing on them, it's not talent, it's that character stuff. And rightfully so, because that can bite you on the butt.
Yes. And, somebody once told me, if you make an exception for one player, you will have a team full of exceptions. Yeah. And it doesn't mean you have to have a team of choir boys either.
No.
But when you did the Richard Sherman draft profile, you wouldn't have said he had a character issue. You'd just say that he's perhaps a bit too competitive, if anything, and plays with the ultimate chip on his shoulder. But that's what made him elite, and that's different to Jaylen Carr. I shouldn't laugh because it's not funny, really. But it just, the stuff about him was just unbelievable. And you kind of want to shout it from the rooftops, because I just got so tired of people saying they should have took him. And it's like, there's not 1 ounce of me that regrets that decision. That they were spot on, as were the Lions, by the way. Like everyone thinks the Lions are pretty smart these days. They didn't take him either.
No.
So, there's a few teams that did the right thing, I'm afraid. And good for the Eagles. Well done to them. But,
100%. Hey, they're good on their wrist. They could afford to take it, and it's paid off. Good for them. But I'm with you, man. It's you wash your hands of it and you say they made the right decision for the time. And John, if it went wrong, John gets fired. Yeah. If Carter goes out and gets in a car wreck, like after the McDowell thing, that's a single thing that could get you fired alone on that basis. Just there.
He would have been under so much pressure if that happened, and you just can't take that risk.
No,
after McDowell, like you said, you couldn't do it.
You can't do it. Snail with the $2 donation. He likes himself Kyle Williams. Any chance you see the Seahawks taking Kyle Williams? I think they did meet with him. I think
he separates wonderfully. He was the best of the receivers at the Senior Bowl in terms of getting open. Highly dynamic. I think round 2, round 3 is where he deserves to go. So I could see him in Seattle.
Fun player. Usually you see this kind of package of a Kyle Williams player, don't you, Robin? More of the Tutu Atwell, Hollywood Brown kind of size at 5'9" versus a true 6-foot guy who can play on the outside and be a little bit bigger than that. I like him a lot too as well. Noah Lansing, thank you for the $2 donation, says, where is the most likely round we'll take a quarterback? Rob was thinking early second. We trade up. That's your gut on this one.
I mean, listen, is it the most likely round? It might be. Yeah, it might be round 2. I mean, they have 2 second-round picks. I think day 2 in general would be my answer if I could give like a range. I think they probably will take a quarterback in rounds 2 or 3. If I had to pick one or the other, maybe it will be round 2. Yeah, if there's a run on the position, if they really like one of these guys, they'll go up. It's just whether or not they really like one of them. And again, seeing that Mason Taylor thing makes me think, well, maybe they'll move up for a different position instead, and they'll not reach on a quarterback. But yeah, I've just got a feeling, that day 2 they're going to take one.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think John really wants to get back in that Russell Wilson round 3 space of things, because that's where he's got these guys probably locked into their evaluation, and versus they're driving up the boards, and it's because so many teams need quarterbacks. That's why I think the 4 first round guys will go, not because the talent's worthy at all. I'm right in alliance with you on that. It's really just the drive of scarcity, supply and demand, and the demand right now is just through the roof for the quarterback position as we come into this draft.
And GMs know there's no better way to maybe buy yourself an extra year than to have a young quarterback that just needs the chance. So
that's right. Well, like Shedeur Sanders doesn't make to me any sense with his skill set in New York, outdoors, in that weather with his arm. But yet they take a quarterback and they've got their 2 guys, and Brissett and Russell don't work out. And then they bring him out for 3 games at the end, and he does marginally well. Dable and the GM get
Can I just say, like, I just find the idea hilarious that you would have a quarterback room that has Shedeur Sanders, Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, and Tommy DeVito, who is like the loudest, that crappy 3rd string quarterback in the league. Like, you could not fit any more drama and ego into one quarterback room. Like, how can you do that? Like, I don't think the Giants are going to take Shedeur, purely because that would be insane to have those 4 guys together in a quarterback room. Like, how could you live with that? And who's guiding Shedeur at that point? Like, who's the mentor in that little collection there? It sounds like it just sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. But I kind of want it to happen because it'd be hilarious.
I kind of do too. I want it to happen is get more quarterbacks picked up in front of us as possible. But I agree with you. It doesn't make any sense. But that's what I'm watching these NFL organizations sometimes. That whole save your neck, save your throat, do just to keep your job. Like, that starts to be a lot bigger for the driver, and you can't serve 2 masters. And we want to draft this guy, develop him right, put him in the right spot, get him going, let that rose grow. And then you've got I need to keep my effing job. And the pull between the 2 starts to be this one takes over, and that becomes, he'll be fine a couple years when we're gone if we're not here. And if it works out, great. But I do agree, doesn't seem like it'd be a good fit. But any of these teams, like a Giants type team, a Jets team that's really not in a position at this point, they need to build that thing up, or at least figure a direction out.
Yeah.
Dogzilla, thank you for the $2 donation. Says, Rob, do you have a Boz t-shirt?
I do not have a Boz shirt. So my friend, who is a Broncos fan, sent me a Drew Lock shirt, though, when the Seahawks traded away Russell Wilson, because he thought that was a hilarious deal, and that they'd got one over on the Seahawks. So yeah, we all got the last laugh there in that one. So but I have still got the Drew Lock shirt upstairs somewhere.
Yeah, I got my Let Russ Cook shirt. I'm bringing that out someday.
Oh, lovely. I do not have a Boz shirt, I'm afraid. No.
Feeding More Seahawks, thank you for the $2 donation. Says, let's talk about the 2005 Super Bowl. Is that a legit game, Rob? Was that legit? Was that just all above board, that one? Was there no influence whatsoever from any?
I mean, obviously some of the calls in that game are preposterous. I do think there was the Seahawks could have been a bit more aggressive in that game with their play calling. But yeah, I mean, they were screwed. Obviously, there was some absolutely horrendous decisions in that game. And I don't know. The thing is, though, I don't know if I change anything. I think almost that happening made the Super Bowl even better. The fact that it was I quite liked the team and the coach that managed to get the first one, and that you had that memory there. I just wish they hadn't had the second Super Bowl after the year after that. Obviously ended the way that it did. And I was always kind of like, there was a period after that second Super Bowl against New England where I really struggled. I don't know what you were like, but I really struggled to get over that game. Like that stuck with me for to the point where I was like almost in tears when they beat the Vikings, in the playoffs the next year, because I thought they had to get back to the Super Bowl and put that right. And when Blair Walsh missed that kick, it was almost too much. Like, it was too much relief. And then obviously they got spanked by the Panthers the following week, so it didn't matter. But it was too emotional. It was awful. And yeah, I wish they hadn't had that. And I was convinced they needed to get back and sort of put that right. But I think when they get back to the Super Bowl in our lifetimes, it will make amends for that, hopefully, in a way that winning in 2012 or 2013 made some kind of an amends for the screw job that happened in 2005. So yeah, I'm pretty comfortable with it. And look, I'm a Seahawks fan from England who follows the England football team passionately, and I work in South Yorkshire where the sports teams are all horrendous. So I've had my fair share of misery in 40 years of life when it comes to a sporting front. So it's water off a duck's back, as we say over here.
Is there any fixed games in soccer history that are just notable in that same way of like that game in '87? They came in and threw a yellow card out, and
Well, there was a famous game. It was before. I mean, I was 2 years old when it happened, but they called it the Hand of God. I don't know if anybody knows this. And there's a very famous soccer player called Maradona who was Argentinian, and the ball flew up into the air, and he punched the ball in with his hand, and it was very obvious, but the ref didn't see it, and the goal was given, and that became like a legendary moment in soccer, and then Argentina went on to win the World Cup that year as well. So he became like public enemy number one in England, and it didn't do any good for the relations, which were already quite tough between Argentina and Britain anyway. So was
it the Falklands after that, or what was the?
I think that was around that time, yeah. So it wasn't good.
So what you're saying is you guys bombed them because he used his hand. That's we get down to the heart of this.
There was that one. I have got a story about Maradona. My dad went to Argentina. My dad used to travel around the world with his job, and he went to Argentina, and there was a load of commotion going out in the hotel he was in, and he went out, stuck his head out to the hotel door to see what was going on, and he saw a stark bollock naked Maradona in the hallway, and he obviously locked himself out of some whatever was going on, some party that he had going on next door, he saw. Well, he didn't see the hand of God. He saw something else of God that night.
Pinky of God.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Can you see the video? Is the video online on YouTube? Can you see him handing it in somewhere of the moment?
If you type in "hand of God" into YouTube, you will find it's such a famous thing. It's probably in the top, maybe even the top 3 things that have ever happened in soccer. So it's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Nuts. I'm gonna have to go look that up.
Well, before my time, I mean, I've had plenty of misery since then, and plenty of times in England have been cheated out of things. But we've also been pretty crap for most of my life. So we are quite good at the minute, though. I went to the final. They got to the European Championship final last summer in Germany. I went to the final at massive expense, thinking that I was going to see England win something for the first time in my life. And we all went out there, all the English fans, and we were convinced this was going to be the year. And they lost the final. So more misery, more depression.
It is hard getting so close to that top, and then you just back to the bottom of the hill, starting all over again. And I agree. I think that the loss to the Patriots was a more brutal Super Bowl. I mean, how we still to this day, I know you get in your comments every once in a while. I do too, from the random fans who come in there, from other fans that should have ran it. Like that still comes up down the feed. It's like it'll never escape that part of it. But
I just feel it. I just feel as if we've all been we've all had been robbed of sort of this unbelievable period of Seahawks football. That's all it's going to get remembered by. And if they'd have just won that game, they would have been remembered as, one of the elite teams ever.
Yeah.
It would have been one of the greatest. It would have been a dynasty at that point. And they may well have won the next year as well. You just don't know what would have happened. And that one bloody play just wrecked everything. And the frustrating thing is they shouldn't have run the ball. They just shouldn't have thrown that pass.
Yeah.
Call
roll them out. Give them an option to throw it away. Did you see, by the way, the little thing that dropped on G. Scott? Nobody's mentioned it at all. But G. Scott's doing the interview with Brandon McBain about a month ago. Did you hear Brandon McBain?
I did. I remember the thing. Remind me what it was. I remember.
So he's talking about the next day in the locker room with Russ, and after that Super Bowl, and that Russ told him that he audibled.
Right. Okay.
And that's the whole thing that everybody's been wondering through this whole period of time, is if he did, and nobody's, but that's also, we've wondered on this too, to your point on this, the whole team collapsed after that point. It was also, it hurt all of our soul watching it, but we also know now in retrospect that the team basically was never the same after that moment, and you go, just wow, it's
There was a I mean, I've heard one or two conspiracy theory type things about that game and all of that, and there's all sorts of stuff that's already out there. I know I know one of the players broke his hand in the locker room afterwards, smashing one of the locker rooms, one of the lockers, because he was so pissed off. One of the defensive players. So yeah, it's a horrible memory. It'll never leave me, that game, because I remember I was in my old house I used to live in. My brother had come round to watch the game, and then it happened, and it was as if someone had just taken your heart out of your body, just ripped it out, like in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Like, it come out, and then and I had to go to work. I was on the breakfast show and the radio, so I had to go to work an hour after the game. So I didn't go to bed. I just stayed awake through. Went to work, and then had to read out on the bulletin, on the sports bulletin, the result of the Super Bowl all morning. And I remember sort of going home and not knowing what to do. And then the Tuesday was the same. I was like a zombie all day Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, I just said to my wife, "Will you please just sit down and watch the play with me?" And then I just had a rant about the play to my wife, who couldn't care less really about the game, but was there just in a kind of supportive capacity. And I remember just absolutely having a meltdown and just bawling my eyes out about it, because I was just that emotionally wrecked and tired from the whole thing.
It's one of the all-time in history of sports, the most brutal rug pull moments that anybody's ever gone through. I mean, that's why people still do that. They should have run it. I mean, it's on fan bases that aren't Seahawks fans saying that, that it's still, they're thinking about it. It's that how bothered. Marshawn's talked about it. It's like he realized, like, he's still this day, probably doesn't have a day he walks in his life where it was like, should have given me the ball, man. Should have given me the ball. And it's weird that things get to that stage in the zeitgeist a little bit.
I bet that happens every day, isn't it? For Marshawn Lynch.
Every day, I bet. And it's just like, you don't get that in life where there's that many people that see something like that clearly, and it's true, and it is, and that's why it is so brutal looking back, even on retrospective, and going, dude, oh my God, what did we do there? Why do we do that? But the thing about that is that someday we'll maybe know the full truth on that. Mabane coming out and saying that, and I'm not trying to throw Russ under, just partially to understand and explain why did this so dissolve the locker room. Well, if there was an audible call, that would have been a helping hand to that, right? Like that starts to make some of that track and make sense if you start to backdate that one a little bit, right?
I think what we all need is an unexpected Super Bowl win. A win where you don't see it coming necessarily, and they just get hot, a bit like the Giants when they won it twice. You get hot in the playoffs, and you just end up winning the damn thing. And it's unexpected, it's brilliant, and you can just enjoy it. I think that's what this fan base needs, by the way.
Agreed. That would definitely help them get around this one for sure.
Yeah, we can all kind of draw a line under it then and be like, yeah, we lost that one, but we've won 2 now, so...
Yeah. And to your point too, this 10 years is definitely wear down the fan base. You can feel a little bit of a sense of impatience and what are we doing here? And come on, get this thing locked in. The sense of urgency is definitely starting to really ramp up, I think, for the fan base, and their frustration a bit with that.
Yeah.
Which rightfully so. 10 years is a long time. Henry Diesel, thank you for the $20 donation, Henry. Very kind of you, man. Big fat $20 drop. Says best of the best. So grateful for this. Well, thank you, man. I do really appreciate you, Rob, doing this, coming in. I know you're just running, and I'm even keeping you a little longer here, but thank you so much for doing this today. Really highly recommended. Hopefully we can get back, have you back in here again in the future, because I know people really were clamoring for this in a big time way. I appreciate talking to you too, man. Noah Lansing, thank you for the $2 donation. Says more crossovers. One of my favorite streams in some time. Well, that's kind of you to say, man. Thank you for that, Noah. Appreciate you there, man, for the multiple donos. Dogzilla says with $2 donation, Rob, any opinions on Ratcliffe, the Man U guy?
Well, Man United are an absolute shambles. I mean, I don't know if you're a Man U fan, Dogzilla monster, but I don't think it's going to get any better anytime soon. Like, half of my family are from Manchester, so on my mum's side, and they grew up big Man United fans, season ticket holders. Their house was like 5 minutes walk from Old Trafford. So, I keep half an eye on them, but I'm not a Man U fan myself. And
you guys getting some fun fights, I guess, huh? Do the switchblades come out at the dinners?
Yeah. I mean, the team that my father's side all followed were far worse than Manchester United. So there was very little rivalry there. But yeah, Man United are appalling mess at the minute. So I'm sorry, I don't know. I don't see it getting any better anytime soon, I'm afraid.
Well, there you go. There you go. You guys going to take it this year, by the way? And after you just came up short the prior year, is it everything going to be relocked and reloaded, or is it like that was our shot
in the England team?
Yeah, in the England team.
So they don't have a tournament again until the World Cup now. So that'll be next summer in the States. Obviously, the World Cup. I'm kind of hoping that England end up in Seattle, by the way, so I can get over there.
That'd be cool.
Also, because I know people in Seattle, and I'll be saying, "Can I come and sleep on your couch?" Because the hotels were like $1,000, well, probably like $2,000 a night hotels to watch the World Cup. So that's one of the reasons why. But yeah, I think they will have a chance at the World Cup. We have one of the better teams, but it's England, so
all they know how to do is break a heart.
Well, that's it. We've been in the last two European finals, and I was convinced we were going to win not the last one, but the one before, and we lost in a shootout. So it's kind of the last gasp thing. And I had this huge bottle of champagne in my fridge. I'm not a drinker, by the way. I'm a terrible lightweight, and I can't drink. But I had the champagne in the fridge. If England won, it was getting straight out, and I was drinking the whole thing myself. And then I was going to run down to the pub, which is down the road from my house. And I was just going to, on my own, I would just leave at the house, the kids and the wife at home. I'm going to sprint to that pub, and I am just going to go and make friends with the first person I see. And we're going to drink all night. I am going to be asleep in that beer garden that night. I don't care. It's anything goes, just crazy. The whole country would have been doing the same thing because it's like a religion over here. It would have been a big mess, and they lost. And instead, once again, I've talked about I was crying a lot during this. Everybody thinks we're right, big baby, but I was crying instead. So, and the champagne never got drunk, and it's still somewhere in the house. So there we go.
For next year, you guys just for next year. That's how you keep that. Build it up. Don't break it until the right time. It's coming with it. So it's gonna be hard to not be a drinker in England. We picture over here in America. It's like 12 o'clock, governor, time to go to the pub, huh?
I was in Sweden last week, and they drink my God, they were drinking beer all the time. Like people were out in the bars, and anything. Over here, the culture has changed quite a lot. People are very health conscious in England now. And you see, the gyms are packed, and people are very self-conscious of how they look and how they eat. And there's definitely been a shift. And when I was at university, for example, I could drink like an absolute champion. Like I was the the Brett Favre of drinking, really, at my age, like at 18. And then now, like I just have to sniff a beer and I'm tipsy. So it's totally different.
Same. I'm in the same place, man. I barely drink, but when I do, I don't have anywhere near the constitution of my younger self. It's kind of brutal. It's pretty sad, really. HHG, thank you for the $2 donation. Says should have ran it, B. I'll never escape it. I don't mind it. It used to be like, I used to fight it. Be like, no, there's reasons they did what they did, but it is what it's a painful memory. Henry Diesel coming in with the final here, big fat $20 donation. And that's two $20 donations from you, Henry, man. I salute you, brother. Thank you for that support to the channel. Really, really appreciate all of you guys in that way. Says that Super Bowl 49 is still a fresh wound to me. Really don't like talking about it. My idiot friend is a 49er fan and never lets it go. Rob, how about Liverpool? Big fan since Gerrard.
Well, they're going to win the Premier League, Liverpool, but I don't know how sustainable it is. Let's just say that. I'm not sure if this is a one-off, I think, for Liverpool. So I'm not sure that I'm not sure they'll be doing that again next year. So, but that, great job from Arne Slot, the new head coach there. So kudos to him.
Plucky Cinderella story, eventually always turned into a pumpkin, like that.
I think a little bit like that. I think obviously Liverpool are one of the giants of European football, but so it's not that plucky. But yeah, I think a bit of a surprise that Manchester City were as bad as they are this year, and Liverpool have capitalised. So good for him. And I've got a soft spot for Feyenoord, who are a Dutch team, and he left them to take over at Liverpool last summer. So well done to him.
All right, let's go Liverpool on that. But yeah, Henry, you can hear in Rob's voice talking about it. I still look at it the same way. I had a girlfriend at the time, Rob, where we get Jermaine catch goes down. He makes that incredible grab. She turns to me and she says, "They're coming up the line scrimmage. We've won it. We're going to win." And I almost wanted to strangle her right there because I knew she jinxed us. I said, "You
So it's
did
her
not
fault
say
then.
that." Oh, I was so sure. Like I stopped my smile, my celebration. I knew she just put down the gavel of death right there. I was like, "How dare you?" And I don't know if I ever forgave her for that, quite frankly. I think I might have just always held that against her. And like, it was you. It was you. But Henry, thank you, man. I think it's that way for all the fan base. Rob touches on it though. Winning solves all. That is the ultimate salve. And if you go out there, you go get yourself a Super Bowl, we won't hear very, very little about that Super Bowl loss moving in the future. Instead, it'll be, hey, here's a team that's gone to 4 Super Bowls in 30 years. We've got organizations in the NFL haven't gone to one, much less won one. So that'd be a hell of an accomplishment if we could do it. Last dono of the day here. Rob, been so kind here. Thanks for hanging in here with me, Rob. Says, Henry, how can a 49er fan talk about a team choking in a Super Bowl? Well, there you go. He's definitely not one to talk there. I'm sure they turned the lights out on us. No, they turned the lights out. That's why. We came back from the lights and we were just discombobulated. So what are you going to do?
Mahomes turned out the lights in the last one.
Yeah, exactly. But Niners will come up with some excuse, or point to the rings 50 years ago or wherever they won it last. So, but thank you, Jordan. I really appreciate it. And all of you guys, thank you for so much of the donations here on the channel today. Rob, you're awesome for hanging out here so long. Sorry to keep you a little bit of extra time on this one. So, hey, he's been here almost 2 hours. Let's do us a favor. Please, again, down in the description link section below, you'll find a link directly to Rob's channel. Click that link, go over to his channel, give him a subscription. Kind enough to take his time out here and come here like he has as a man who's doing double duty on as far as job goes, got the wife, got the kids. So he's got a lot going on. I really thank you for taking the time out here. Really sorry again to kind of hold you so a little bit longer on it, but thanks for, I knew I was going to enjoy being able to chop this up with you. And I do go a little long sometimes.
No, absolutely no problem at all. I've loved being on, and there's nothing I love more than talking about the Seahawks. So any opportunity I have to do it, I grasp it with both hands. So really appreciate the invite, Brandon. And it's been like a little thing for me to try and get up to 10,000 subscribers before this draft, and we've only just scraped over 9. So if there is anybody out there who would be generous enough to try and even just get us up a little bit closer, that'd be much appreciated. But I've thoroughly enjoyed coming on. I hope we can do it again soon, Brandon.
I would love to have you on here again. I as you love to talk about Hawks anytime I can get the chance, and especially with someone like yourself that is as in deep as I am on this, or even deeper at times on certain stuff, and that you can really, like you say earlier on this, learn more coming out of these kind of experiences than you walked into it with. And that's what you love about this sport, is all of the layers that you can get into this. It's not merely just watching what's happening on the surface. It's all of what's kind of existing beneath. That's really the true, to me, fun part of really getting into this stuff. So thank you for taking the time. We're definitely going to have you back and pull you back in when we get a chance to here. Folks, get him over the top of 10,000. Let's do this. He's been kind of coming here. He does great content, covers the team awesomely. He gets into their draft as deeply as anybody out there covering it, any of the spaces goes. Rob, you're awesome for doing this. Thank you so much. You guys are awesome for all the donations and the support. Hit that like button if you can on you guys' way out the door. But most often, let's make sure we're subbing up to our guests here as they take the time out like they have and bringing it. You brought the goods today, too, on that, Rob. So thank you for that. We'll be back soon, folks. But until next time, please don't you ever forget, go Hawks. Yeah, I got to go Hawks from you, Rob. I'm not going in.
Oh, sorry. Go Hawks.
There we go.